Hey guys, Mike Settele here of Settele Tutoring, and after many requests over many years, I have finally delivered a video of me just taking a practice reading section in full. It is the 65 minutes. It is the March 2020 QAS exam. Now, I had done a video or two about some questions from it, so that people had requested, but I didn't remember those, and I didn't have an answer key made, so I don't think I'd ever seen this reading section before, and I certainly didn't remember it as I was doing it. Now, I did get a perfect score, 40 out of 40. However, I got a question wrong. You will see when I get to it, but I did get a question wrong, and that's just because in this particular test, you could get one wrong and still get a perfect score. So you will see me use the no reading strategy. However, this video is a little bit deficient compared to my others in terms of the quality of my explanations. And that's because I was just trying to take it as if it were a test. So I'm not taking the time to explain every single word as I would if it were one of my other videos. So please subscribe to this channel. This took a long time to make, so the least you can do is subscribe and tell your friends to subscribe. But for my better explanations, go to my website, look at this channel. I've got way more detailed things for other tests. But just to show you how I think, how I explain it to myself when I'm taking an SAT, I am talking out loud and kind of saying the bare minimum of what I need to say to kind of get to the answer. There are definitely questions I'm confused where I had to take a little bit of a guess, and I got very close to running out of time, but you will see the no reading strategy is an effective way to deal with the uncertainties of these passages and to move quickly. I think that had I not been filming myself, I would have been even faster, but hopefully all of this makes sense and provides you with something. But if this is the first video of mine that you're seeing, I don't recommend starting with this. Go to my website, go to my channel, subscribe, and please watch other reading videos. I have a very long, thorough lesson about what the no reading strategy is, and all the things that I use in this video are explained in much better detail in another video. So definitely do that. And just as one little thing too, I did have to make cuts in between all the passages. There's just because it's the technical thing. I couldn't record for 65 minutes straight. My computer would have exploded. So I had to make those cuts, and I didn't do any shenanigans in between. All I did was reset my videos and restart the timer. So hopefully this helps you. And at the end, I will do some analysis on the question that I missed, a couple others that I had trouble with, and just general ideas about how I felt taking this section and what you can take away from it. So I hope you enjoy it. Again, please subscribe. It is really helpful for me, and it took a lot to make this, so please. But if you already subscribed, thank you. And here we go. Reading section, March 2020, QAS begins now. All right, passage 1, 65 minutes on the clock. Here we go. Okay, question 1. Well, we should read the blurb first. Adapted from this person, Icarus girl. After a long journey from her home in England, 8-year-old Jessamy is meeting her mother's family in Nigeria for the first time. So, okay, sounds good.Jessamy's young. 8-year-old Jessamy. Okay, cool. First question, in using the phrase uncertain circle, the narrator most nearly means that the family members are. So, uncertain circle, family members. They all stood in an uncertain circle, and then her grandfather came forward, greeted her mother, shook hands with her father, although he seemed mellower and smaller in the picture that her mother had painted for her over the years, just at a sudden irrational fear that he might start shouting. So they might not know each other, I guess. They're meeting for the first time, so the blurb probably helps here. Okay, they are disoriented. No, they're not talking about the journey being difficult, self-conscious and tentative about interacting, probably. Openly suspicious. This is a little too negative. Dependent on one another for reassurance. I don't think they're dependent. That's pretty strong. So B seems right. They're self-conscious and tentative about interacting because they're just meeting each other for the first time. Yeah, seems good. Okay, number 2. And this is an evidence pair. Based on the passage, which factor most decisively influences Jess's reaction to meeting her grandfather? Okay, so 1 through 3. There they all stood, uncertain circle. Then her grandfather came forward, greeted her mother, and shook hands with her father. So, okay. So they're meeting. The grandfather's not meeting the daughter there. So mom and pop. Okay. 3 to 7. What do they say here? Although he seemed mellower and smaller than the picture that her mother had painted for her over the years, Jess had a sudden and irrational fear that he might start shouting at her. So, okay. Well, there's some sort of fear, so let's include that one. 8 to 10. He looked at her, put his hands on his hips in mock consternation, and her cousins and her mother laughed. Okay, so they're laughing. All of these seem relevant. 12 to 15. His hands were big and square, spade-like and palms deeply etched and calloused. She took a step forward, smiling a wobbly, nervous smile that she could not feel on her face. So she's nervous. Okay. All right, all of these seem like they could matter. So what are we doing? The factor most decisively influences Jess's reaction to meeting her grandpa. Probably the photo, right? His intimidating physical presence. Okay, maybe. His indifference to other family members. No, he's not indifferent to other family members. Her parents' concerns about being reunited. No, they don't have any concerns in any of those lines. Her mother's ominous descriptions of his temperament. Well, let me go back. That might be right. Although he seemed mellower and smaller than the picture that her mother had painted for her. So she said that he was not mellow. Jess had a sudden irrational fear they might start shouting. Yeah, maybe. His hands were big and square. See, this is not like an intimidating physical appearance. Just because you have big hands does not mean that you're physically intimidating. Yeah, no. I'm assuming that it's this, because the mother describes him as mellow, so that's in lines 3 through 7 here. Yeah, this is number 3. Yeah, she's painting a picture over the years. So that's what's influencing her. Is she's been hearing stories. So this is definitely it. So that's this one. Cool. Okay. This is strong, but whatever. In the passage, is this another one? Okay. In the passage, the actions of Jess's father, so it's probably chronology rule from, let's say, 3 through, I don't know, 32, somewhere in that zone. So in the passage, the actions of Jess's father suggest that he, okay. So this is all with the grandfather. Her father standing slightly outside the circle. That might be important. Smiled encouragingly. She did not know what expected of her. He had nearly reached when suddenly, on an outward gust of air, he half announced the name, Warallahu. She froze. Of course, she knew that Warallah was her Yoruba name, and the name that her grandfather had asked in a letter to be called when her mother had her Nigerian naming ceremony. She knew all this, but nobody had ever called her that. Gesturing to her grandfather. Here in this stone, okay, this is nothing but the father. So the father is off to the side. That's all I literally get. He's outside the circle. The actions suggest he is less sociable. Maybe. I don't know. That's not the real reason he might be outside the circle. Has an imperfect understanding. No, it's not about the culture. Advocates for Jess to choose her own name. The actions of Jess's father suggest that he advocates for Jess. That's very strong. Wishes to promote Jess's introduction. I don't know. It doesn't say what he wishes. So the name thing might matter. It seems to be coming up. I don't see this name thing. I'm going to come back to this question. Maybe I read more that gives me more. But right now, it just seems that he's less sociable. But I don't know. They're not really comparing him. Her father standing slightly outside the circle. It's probably about the name. This whole thing is about the name. This is a dumb summary. The thing's about the name. Her mother had, yeah. Nobody called her that, not even her mother. It's another person. Should she answer to this name? I don't know. This is a tough one. The name seems important. I'm going to come back to this one. I need to read more of the passage. Let's go to 5. Based on 21 and 32, which choice best describes Jess's initial reaction to being addressed as Warella? Okay, so her initial reaction, we had this here. Warella who? Right? Her first reaction is not knowing. She froze, not knowing what to say or do. She knew that it was her Yoruba name, something about the mother. Nobody ever called her that, not even her mother, whom she could now see from the corner of her eye making anxious, silent gestures for her to go to her grandfather. Okay. So the name is, she's surprised by it. Okay. She resents, no. It's too strong, too negative. She recognizes the name but cannot recall its precise meaning. I don't really know, talk about the meaning. She is startled that her grandfather has remembered her name. No, she doesn't think he's like demented. She is aware that it is her name but is unable to knowledge. Yeah, she gets it. It says that. It literally says that here. Of course, she knew that Willow was her name, but she froze, not knowing to say or do. Yeah, Merle means gold, so it doesn't say that she doesn't know what it means. She knows what it means. Yeah, that's it. That's definitely it. Okay. Which choice best supports the idea that Jess is familiar with some of the customs that her mother's family observes? So she's familiar with some of the customs. That some is going to do a lot of work, I can tell. So 23 to 26. Of course, she knew that Willow was her Yoruba name, that her grandfather had asked in a letter to be called that when her mother had held her Nigerian naming, so there's a Nigerian naming ceremony, so she knows about the ceremony. So maybe that's it. Oh my God, this scrolling is so awful. Okay, so there's a ceremony. 2932. Nobody had ever called her Warola, not even her mother, whom she could now see making the gestures. So there's nothing here about the customs. So yeah, 42 to 46. Now that's going to break the chronology rule here. So I don't love that, but let's see. 42 to 46. Got to read it. She could not make herself move forward, so she stayed where she was, avoided his touch, looked up into her grandfather's face, smiled, and yeah, no, this isn't about any customs, so that's no good. 59 to 63, also out of the chronology. It's down here. He had the same wide, strong jawline with the determined set as his mother, same prominent cheekbones, I just could not see. Yeah, this is just about the grandfather's face, so no, okay. So it's definitely this because they're talking about the ceremony, so that seems like a custom. Okay, good. The main purpose of the description in lines 33 to 37 is to. So 33 to 37. Okay, 33 to 37, so we're like kind of like looking here. Okay. Nobody ever called her that, not even her mother, whom she could now see from the corner of her eyes making anxious gestures. Here in the stone-walled corridor where the sunlight came in through enormous stiff mosquito screens over every window and her clothes clung to her like another skin, Rolla sounded like another person. Not her at all. Should she answer to this name and by doing so steal the identity of someone who belonged here? Should she become Warola? Okay, so she's upset about the name or weirded out by it. So the main purpose is to underscore Jess's philosophical musings by invoking a natural setting? I don't think so. I don't think the natural setting has anything to do with it. Suggest that correspondence between Jess's physical surroundings and her emotional state. Portray Jess's thoughts about her Nigerian background through a nostalgic lens. No, she's not being nostalgic. Reveal Jess's acceptance of her new life. No, it's not an acceptance. This is hard. I don't know. I guess maybe the setting does matter. Let's see again. Here in this stone-walled corridor where the sunlight came in through enormous, stiff mosquito screens over every window, and her clothes clung to her like another skin, it's another person. So she feels lost, I guess. Should she answer to this name and someone who belonged there? Okay. So the setting, I guess, is important. Underscore Jess's philosophical musings by invoking a natural setting. That just sounds so nonsensical. Suggest the correspondence between Jess's physical surroundings and her emotional state. Yeah, she feels that she's not where she's supposed to be. It's a different person's name. It's a different setting. I guess that's it. It's such a weak choice. It kind of works. I don't know what philosophical musings are. It's not a natural setting. They're in a house, so that seems wrong. She's not nostalgic. She's never been here. She's never been to Nigeria. And she's not accepting her new life. The whole point is this is a positive choice. The whole thing is negative. So yeah, it's definitely B. Okay. The series of quotations, or of questions in 38 to 41 serves primarily to portray Jess's, 38 to 41. So notice the chronology. Number 7, here's number 8, 38 to 41, somewhere over here. It's another person. Should she answer to this name and by doing so steal the identity of someone who belonged here? Should she become Warola? But how? She could not make herself move forward, so she stayed where she was, avoided his touch, looked up into her grandfather's face, smiled, and said quietly but firmly in her most polite voice, "Hello, grandfather." Okay. So she's nervous. She's nervous. Confusion over her grandfather's, no, it's not about his attachment to the culture. Lack of familiarity, no, it's not about other names. Concern about constructing a new sense, yeah, should I become this person? It literally is just like saying this. Uncertainty about the roles of, no, it's not about other family members, right? This is about her and who she is. This is definitely a C. Jess's second encounter with her grandfather differs from her first encounter because in the second encounter, so this is a no line reference question, probably somewhere between like 38 and 76. Okay. Second encounter. How do I know it's the second encounter? After they had taken baths, okay. She disappeared. Son of the uncle, swiftly dropping a kiss. Father. Here, released her into her grandfather's clutches. Okay. So her grandfather did have a face. It was a broad line face. The smile and frown lines ran deep into his skin. His eyes made smaller by the loosened flesh around them. He had the same wide, strong jawline with a determined set as her mother. And the same prominent cheekbones. I just could not see that this were angular, blah, blah, blah. He was quite short and moved. So she's just like a lot of description. Okay. As Jess sat in the parlor, keeping very still so that she wouldn't take up much space on the brown and white sofa, she allowed herself to stare openly and seriously at her grandfather. So this time she's like looking at him. Before she was nervous, and he did the same. She felt as if there were a piece of him that had crumbled off, maybe, which he was examining for flaws and broken bits. Before deciding whether it was worth taking it to be reattached. There's a little piece of him that had crumbled off, maybe, which he was examining for flaws and broken bits before deciding whether it was worth taking it to be reattached. It was impossible to tell what he thought of her. Okay. He sat upright, his hands on his knees. They were both waiting, supposedly for her auntie. Really just, they were waiting to see if they would like each other. Okay, so just like, there's more, they're looking at each other more. I don't know. On the second encounter, must face her grandfather without support. No, it's not about the other family members. Is more clearly startled by her grandfather's, he's not unpredictable. Has become more confident of her grandfather's ultimate approval. No. Has little time to become acquainted with her grandfather's, okay, I don't like any of these. It's not about time. Okay, so I must have missed something. Jess's second encounter with her grandfather differs from her first because in the second encounter, maybe it is the other family members, right? What does it say? After they had taken baths, her mother disappeared, her father went somewhere else, swiftly dropping a kiss. Her father released her into her grandfather's clutches. Yeah, so this just says everyone else is gone, I guess. They sat in the parlor, did the same. Yeah, I guess that's it. She's still not startled. He's not being unpredictable. He's just sitting there. She's not interested in his approval. So, I mean, at the end here, it even says the opposite, like waiting to see if they would like each other. They don't know if they're going to like each other. Has little time to become acquainted with her grandfather. There's not about time. So it's definitely A. This is a good example of why your summary isn't necessarily going to be a good one because it's just off. As used in line 76, crisp most nearly means. So crisp, 76. The crisp lines of his white shirt almost molding him. So they're noticeable. They're noticeable. Sharp. Cool. All right, that's 14 minutes I'm at. Okay, and resuming with passage 2. There we go. Okay, this passage is adapted from Jennifer M. Groh, Making Space, How the Brain Knows Where Things Are. Okay, cool. So which choice was the overall structure? So we're going to come back to this as a whole passage question. Based on the passage, how would the author most likely respond to another scientist's claim that the theory of embodied cognition can account for thoughts regarding abstract concepts such as peace and honesty? This seems maybe like it might be in the beginning. This is very specific. Theory of embodied cognition. So how would the author respond to another scientist's claim? I don't know. According to the passage, embodied cognition is the theory that... So let's just read the beginning. I might be able to get certainly that question. The implication of the overlap between areas of the brain responsible for cognition and areas responsible for sensory and motor processing, so overlap, is that perhaps the operations of cognition are implemented at least in part via sensory and motor structures. So cognition, in part, sensory motor. That is, perhaps thinking also involves activating some subset of sensory and motor pathways of the brain. For example, when you mentally picture sitting on the couch in your living room, that thought might be implemented by partially activating the visual, tactile, auditory, olfactory, and motor responses that would have occurred if you were actually there. The theory that thought might involve simulating the activity patterns in our sensory motor areas of the brain is called grounded or embodied cognition. Okay. Well, that probably answers this question. According to the passage, embodied cognition is a theory that thought emerges from reactions to certain powerful events, not about events. Can be used to improve various, nope, it's not about this. May involve activation of signals that also control the body, demands conscious mental effort, no. It's C. Involve activation of signals that also control the body, right? So sensory and motor structures, you might be activating the things that are also there. Stimulating, that thought might involve simulating the activity patterns in our sensory, yeah, okay. Yeah, it's got to be that. According to the is the theory that thought emerges from reactions to certain powerful events. Maybe this is it. I don't know. Can be used to improve various physiological. No. May involve activation of signals that also control. May involve activation of signals that also control the body. The motor part is that for me. Demands conscious mental. No. Reaction to certain powerful events. Powerful is such a strong word. It's not talking about that. It's not talking about anything powerful. It's just talking about normal thinking. Yeah, I'm sticking with my answer there. Okay. So I still don't know the answer to this one. How would the author most likely respond? Cannot account for thoughts regarding... I have to wait on this. I don't know yet. 20, interest most nearly means. Okay. 20... some of the evidence in favor of this view comes from behavioral experiments that show that how you respond to something depends on otherwise irrelevant features of the sensory stimulus and of particular interest. Note, importance here. These seemingly irrelevant features often involve space. Okay. Importance, note, particular importance. Perfect. When the author refers to certain studies as classic in lines 21 and 52, she most nearly means that the studies are. Okay, 21, 52, classic. 21. These seemingly irrelevant features often involve space. In one classic study, these people asked subjects to judge whether items were upside down or right side up, so something that happened in the past. Okay. 52. Another classic illustration of seemingly unnecessary connection between space and connection comes from mental rotation experiments in one early. So they're talking about past studies. Okay. So these are past. Simple and understand. Most of these are simple and understand their design based on antiquated. No, that means it's out of date. Frequently performed. Frequently, no. Long established and well regarded in the field. Yeah. I don't know. They don't say anything about the design. Long established and well regarded in the field. Right. It seems. In one early study. Yeah. Classic study. There's something about the upside down. Yeah, the design is never said to be simple. That's just, it might be simple, but that doesn't say that. Based on the passage, which statement regarding the subjects in Tucker and Ellis's experiment can most reasonably be inferred? I knew this was going to be an evidence pair. So Tucker and Ellis regarding the subjects in their experiment. Okay. 21 to 24. In one classic study, Mike around this asked subjects to judge whether items were upside down. So nothing, this is a trap. There's nothing about the subjects in this. This is just an empty sentence, 24 to 26. The stimuli consist of photographs of common household objects like frying pans or spatulas. So maybe that they would know what those things are. I don't know. That might work. Common items. Common items. 26 to 28. Subjects were to indicate their choice by pressing a designated button, one button for upright and the other for upside down. So they would know these items, I guess. So this is the same kind of theme here. And then 34 to 38. Secretly, Tucker and Ellis were not particularly interested in the upright inverted choices, but whether the subjects would respond faster when they had to press the same button with the hand on the same side as the handle of the object in the photograph. Okay, so that's something about the side of the photographs. Okay. Side, I don't know what this is about. Okay. So, which statement is most reasonably inferred? They were unaware of the... Yeah, this is exactly what G just said. They had been carefully selected. No, it doesn't say that. They frequently use the utensils. See, this might be a trap, but frequently it doesn't actually say that. Just because they're common doesn't mean that they frequently used it. They had unusually well-developed... No, it doesn't say that. It's definitely A, and it's definitely D, because it says that's what they're doing. They were not interested in this. There was some other thing that they were testing. So, yeah, cool. Okay. Based on the passage, could the likelihood that most participants in Tucker and Ellis's study write with their right hands be used as an effective challenge to their conclusions? Look at that question like this. Okay, so could the likelihood that most participants in Tucker and Ellis's study write with their right hands be used as an effective... So there's something about their right hands. So I'm going to look at anything that has anything to do with that. So 29 to 33. 29 to 33. One button was placed near the subject's left hand, the other near the right hand, a detail we wouldn't normally consider to be important, but that was essential for Tucker. Okay, so this is about left and right. So there's two buttons, I guess. I don't know why that matters. Two buttons. 38 to 42. What's the chronology on this? Based on the table. Really? So this is just it, huh? Okay, 38 to 42. 38 to 42. All the objects had handles and were photographed in multiple orientations, upright with the handle on either the left or right, and inverted with the handle on either the left or the right. So they're doing all sorts of different things, different angles, 42 to 45. Tucker and Ellis found that when the handle on the frying pan was on the left, responses involving the left hand were indeed faster than those involving the right. Subjects also made fewer errors. Oh, that's the end of that one. Okay, so that just means the left matches with the left. I don't know. Left with left, left with left. 47 to 51. When the objects were mirror reversed, the response pattern reversed as well, indicating it was not simply a matter of being faster or more accurate with one hand. Oh, this is probably the evidence, because they're talking about it not being faster or more accurate with one hand, because if you're righty, you're going to be more accurate. They're saying, no, that doesn't matter. So that's probably the evidence. So let me star that. But let's go to the thing here. Why would that, most participants are right-handed, be an effective challenge? The answer is going to be no, because they accounted for this. Because the researchers' study had successfully ruled out the possibility that being right-handed would be a factor. Yeah, because the researchers switched the photograph shown. It doesn't say this. This is too strong. I think it's C. Let me look at A and B. Right-handed people would naturally be able to grasp objects with the right hand more quickly. Yeah, but they switched up the thing, so this doesn't matter. Because right-handed people would be able to visualize objects on their right. Yeah, but they kept the point as they switched it up. So it's definitely this. It's C and D here. They designed to rule it out. Let me just read it again to make sure. When the object reversed, the response reversed as well, indicating that it was not simply a matter of being faster, more accurate. Yeah, they're telling you that it doesn't matter if they're right-handed. Yes, that's what that means. Okay. Ugh, this is so annoying. Okay. Based on the table, which statement best represents the findings about the mean response times? Okay. The findings about the mean response times based on the table. Where's the table? Okay, affect mean response time. Left with left, left with right, right with left. So if they match, they're lower, right? Right and right is low, left and left is low. These two are higher. That's also what the passage says, so that helps. Subjects responded slowest when presented with objects with handles on the left for both response hands. I don't think that's going to be true. I can check that, but I think that's the opposite conclusion here. Subjects responded slowest when presented with objects with handles on the right for both response hands. No. Subjects responded fastest when presented with objects with handles on the opposite side from their response hand for both object handle orientations. Nope, it's going to be this next one. Subjects responded fastest when presented with objects with handles on the same side as their response hand for both object handle orientations. Let me just make sure. Yes, fastest when it's on the same side, left and left, right and right. Cool. Based on the passage, how would an advocate of the theory of embodied cognition most likely explain the results presented in the table? Okay, well, it's the same summary I had before. When the response hand is on the same side as the object handle, the objects in the photographs are easy to recognize. When the response hand is on the same side as the object handle, sensory areas activate more slowly and deliberately. No, same side is not slow, it's fast. When the response hand is on the side that is opposite the object handle, the brain must take longer to adjust the mental visualization, so longer, slower, so opposite, longer. When the response hand is on the side that is opposite the object handle, the brain is able to picture more sharply the object to be grasped. So opposite, that's fast. No, opposite is not fast. Yeah, maybe C is right. Opposite, longer. When the spot, same, easier. So A and C, this is both the same. So same side means faster. That's what our dumb summary of the chart was. So opposite would also mean longer. So same is fast. Not the same is not fast. Easier. It's not that they're recognizing the photograph. It's that they're hitting it. So the brain must take longer to adjust the mental visualization because an advocate is saying embodied cognition is that you can place it, right? Favor of this view comes from behavioral experiments that show how you respond to something depends on otherwise. Well, what do they say here? We stopped reading. Yeah. Viewpoint, they found that how long it took the subject to make judgments very proportional with the amount of rotation. Strictly behavior suggests that mental reasoning can show signatures of real-world spatial constraints. There's no reason for this side. This is just me being dumb here. I think it's that. Yeah, I'm going to just go with that. That seems right. It must take longer to adjust the mental visualization. Sure. Because they're not recognizing that it's a pan. They know it's a pan. They just have to hit the button. Okay. So here, overall structure hypothesis put forth, an experiment testing the hypothesis outline, an explanation for the findings of the experiment is offered. Actually, they don't really do an explanation. A theory is described, studies exploring that theory are recounted, and the significance of those studies is suggested. Okay. A generalization is presented. Two examples of the generalization are contrasted. No, there's no contrast. Theory is introduced. Potential criticism of that theory is considered. There's no criticism. So I think it's B because there's two studies. I don't think they really offer an explanation for the findings. Do they? The significance of the results of those studies is suggested. Suggest the mental reasoning can show. Yeah, it's definitely that. Okay. Based on the passage, how would the author most likely respond to another scientist's claim that the theory of embodied cognition cannot account for thoughts regarding... They just don't talk about this. By arguing that the scientists not fully consider the mechanics of the theory of embodied cognition, by asserting that thoughts about abstract concepts are less common, no, they're not about frequency, by suggesting the theory of embodied cognition should be tested under different experimental conditions, by conceding the theory of embodied cognition, yeah, this is a perfect example. They don't talk about these things, so the person who's writing the passage would just say, like, yeah, this isn't part of my conversation. Like, yeah, it's definitely that. All right, so that's the end of passage 2, and I am at 28 minutes, so we are behind. We're behind. All right, we're starting with passage 3 now. Passage adapted from this person, evolution in toxic world, how life responds to chemical threats, UVB radiation can damage DNA, whatever, is an enzyme that can repair it. Okay, cool. Oh, so much scrolling. Okay, based on the passage, which situation is most similar to that described in lines 10 through 13? 10 through 13, what do they say here? We'll go a little bit before that. Like many ectotherms, some frog species lay their eggs in sunlit ponds or puddles, expressly relying on the sun's energy to speed along egg hatching, larval development, and metamorphosis before their ephemeral pond dries. Much like photosynthesis or vitamin D production, it's a trade-off, in the frog's case, faster development in a higher-risk environment. Of course, like most creatures living under the sun, amphibians are well defended against UVB radiation. They do these other things. Okay, so the sun can hurt and help. It's positive and negative. So it's positive and negative. A male elk that expends considerable energy to grow large antlers. That might be a positive and negative. A deer that forages an area with plentiful resources. Oh, that's also possible. A bird that experiences rapid bone growth while losing bone strength. These are all positive and negative. A turtle that produces a small clutch of eggs because resources are scarce. No, that's only negative. So that helped a little bit. That expends considerable energy. A deer that forages an area with plentiful resources, close to predators. A bird that experiences rapid bone growth. I don't think the bone one is right. While losing bone strength. Well, they're talking about the eggs being... You're sending them along, but then that's also exposing them. Much like photosynthesis, it's a trade-off or vitamin D production. In the frog's case, faster development in a higher risk environment. So higher risk environment, I think it's at risk. So that's the B. That's the predators. 23, the passage indicates that burrowing in mud may benefit some amphibians. I think they just said this. I think I read this. Like burrowing in mud or laying eggs in logs or under rocks in the production of natural sunscreens. Amphibians have redundant systems for DNA repair. Okay, so it protects from the UVB. Okay. The laying egg hatching. Not repairing damage. Yeah, limiting their exposure to sunlight. Just says this. All right. All right. Evidence pairs are the worst. Based on the passage, it can most reasonably be inferred from the research conducted in the French Alps. Okay. 47 to 49. It could be any of these. 47 to 49. What question was answered? Are less resistant species more susceptible to DNA damage caused by increase, more susceptible to DNA? Okay, the question was answered in part by researchers working with single species of frogs inhabiting different altitudes of the French Alps. Okay, so, all right, it doesn't say anything about the frogs. What are we trying to do? Okay, so that's about it, I guess, but it's just like the study. 49 to 54. Frog populations adapted to life at higher altitudes and therefore naturally higher UVB exposures showed less DNA damage than did their lower altitude brethren when exposed to UVB intensities typical of high altitude. So the frogs are different. Okay. Different frogs based on altitude. 54 to 56. Identifying the genetic mechanism of this adaptation will require further study. Okay, further study. More study. 57 to 60. Although the DNA photolase concentrations were not measured, that's not good. The authors report an interesting twist that suggests increased photolase activity in high-altitude tadpoles. Okay, I don't know what this is about. So, what's reasonably inferred? Living at higher altitudes affects larval growth and development. Maybe. High levels of UVB exposure cause lethal effects. Nope. DNA photolase concentrations are naturally higher in the species of frog that were studied. I think so. Tolerance to UVB exposure can vary within a species. Well, no, they're different species. I mean, that's probably true. But are naturally higher in the species of frog that were studied. That's probably something that can be inferred because it says it in the tadpoles, right? That's the tadpole thing, right? Although DNA photolase concentrations were not measured, the authors report an interesting twist that suggests increased photolase activity in high-altitude tadpoles, right? Less DNA damage. Yeah. So they had less DNA damage. I just don't know what line reference this is going to be. This is a tough one. It's not about the larval growth. DNA photolase concentrations are naturally higher in the species of frog that were studied. I think so. I don't know about the ones at the bottom, though. Frog populations, single species of frog inhabiting different altitudes, showed less DNA damage. This adaptation, not measured. Authors report an interesting twist that suggests increased photolase activity in high-altitude tadpoles. Ugh. Okay. Looking at high effects, larval growth and development, high owls, lethal effects. Well, I don't know. Lethal is super strong. DNA photolase concentrations are naturally higher in the species. Well, no, it doesn't compare them to other frogs. This might be a trap here. Tolerance to UVB exposure can vary. Yes. Oh, I see. I understand the experiment now. Right? Because some of them are high up, some of them are low down, so it can change. And so that was stated. Frog participants live at higher altitudes and therefore naturally higher UVB exposure, so less DNA damage than their lower altitude brethren. This is this line reference here. This is B, I believe. 40-something, 48, 49, 54. Yeah. Yep. Okay. 51 experience. Interested in other ways frogs might experience DNA damage, might, I don't know, have, withstand, undergo, ooh, feel, practice, it's either A or C. Undergo DNA damage. That's so weird. Or not. Experienced DNA damage. They studied. Okay, withstand. Withstand is too strong. They're just saying that they're experiencing it. They're not saying that they survive it or something. So undergo, this is too strong. We're going to go with that. It can reasonably be inferred from the passage that a further research demonstrated that DNA photolase protected the high-altitude frogs from BAP-induced DNA damage to the Pacific tree. Oh my God. All right. How are we doing on time here? Not good, not good. Okay. Which choice provides the best evidence? So evidence, this is probably going to be C or D. Chronology rule. Yeah. Okay. Further research demonstrated that DNA photolase protected the high-altitude frogs from BAP-induced DNA damage. Then okay, so 25 to 31. Scrolling is what's slowing me down. Their study reveals strong positive correlation of UVB-resistant frog species and increased photolase activity in comparison to species whose eggs can be protected from direct sunlight. So, UVB resistant and the photolase. Okay. Photolase good. 43 to 46. Their findings raise an intriguing question. Are less resistant species more susceptible to the... Okay. Well, this is just a question, so this is probably not it. 60 to 64. Instead, in other ways frogs might experience DNA damage, they studied the effects of benzoaparine, a well-characterized carcinogen present in cigarette smoke, coal tar, oil, and myriad other combustion products. So that doesn't say anything a batch, just defining what it is, 66 to 70. Activated BAP binds with DNA, causing a kink in the DNA helix, just like UVB. A specialty of DNA photolase is kinky DNA. Kinky DNA. It turns out that high-altitude frogs had less BAP-induced DNA damage compared with their lowland cousins. What am I reading for this? All of that? Okay, that seems important. They're linking it there. So, okay. Demonstrated similar ability to cope with BAP pollution in their environment. Federation DNA photolase protected the high-altitude from BAP. Just demonstrate a similar... having high-altitude habitats? No. Exhibit B. Only when exposed to high altitudes? No. Produced tadpoles have clear evidence of kinks in their DNA helices. In pursuit should. Pass it further. DNA always protected the high altitude frogs from BAP. Similar ability to cope with BAP. Yeah. Right, because they're saying that they're the same. So if they're the same, then similar ability, right? Then producers should demonstrate similar ability to cope with BAP pollution in their environment. I don't get what the Pacific tree frogs are all about. I don't know where these Pacific tree frogs are, but is that the one we studied? All right, I don't care about that. I care about they are coping, if photolasers, if it, there's a similar ability to cope with BAP. High altitude frogs. Where the heck are the frogs? Pacific tree frogs. Am I missing this? Did I read it and just like ignore it? Where are the Pacific tree frogs? We have frogs in the French Alps. Those aren't Pacific tree frogs. Are they in the chart? Salamanders? Maybe this is just like a fake thing that doesn't matter. If further research demonstrated that DNA photolase protected the high-altitude frogs from BAP-induced DNA damage, then Pacific tree frogs should demonstrate. I'm going to assume it's that, and that if this is the reason. I don't really know. I'll come back to these if I have time. I'm not going to have any time though. 72 confirmed. 72. Until enzyme concentrations are confirmed, any added protection cannot be attributed. Okay, so proved. Verified. Which statement is best supported by the data in Figure 1? Figure 1 is saying what? Photolase activity, egg laying location, exposure to sunlight. So photolase activity, okay, is high in these ones. Why? Shallow water, high exposure, variable exposure. Okay. And it's low in the unexposed. Unexposed is low. That's what it is. Unexposed, low. Unexposed equals low. Okay. Only those amphibian species with photolase activity less than lay their eggs where there's no exposure. Okay, that might be right. I have to check that again. All amphibian species with photolase activity greater than that, high exposure. No, I don't think it said that. Only those amphibian species with photolase activity lay their eggs in areas with variable exposure. No, I don't think it said that. All amphibian species with photolase activity of 1 or greater lay their eggs in open, shallow water. I think it's A. Let me just make sure. With photolase activity less than or equal to 0.7, where there's no exposure. So, unexposed, yes. Unexposed, yes. Unexposed, yes. Unexposed, yes. Yeah. Proof. Less than or equal to 0.7, lay their eggs where there's no exposure. Yeah, they all had it. Okay. According to Figure 1, which species lays eggs in location with the greatest exposure? Okay. High exposure. Yeah, Hyla regilla. Whatever that is. Hyla regilla. Look at that little trap there. Ugh, mean. Okay, which data from Figure 2 appear to be inconsistent with the researchers' observations about the frog populations in the French Alps as presented in the passage? Figure 2, inconsistent. Oy, okay. Indicator DNA damage. So MNE, frequency, number of, I don't even know what this means, by altitude of naturally occurring populations. Altitude of naturally occurring populations. So, oh my god. This one seems weird. With UVB exposure. So this is the amount of damage, I'm assuming. Yeah, this thing MNE is the DM. This is the damage. So there's more damage with the UVB exposure at lower altitudes, but at this altitude something weird happens. So okay. The population at 800 meters above sea level without UV exposure, less DNA damage. Okay, what was this again? This was 2450 or 1340. Which ones are weird? Okay, the population at 450 meters is probably this. The population at 450 meters above sea level with UVB exposure experienced more DNA damage than the population of that. Okay, is that true? 450, 2450? 450, 2450. That's true, but I don't see why that would be bad. That seems to make sense. The population 800 more DNA damage than at 294. 800 more damage than 294. I guess. I don't know. That's true. I don't know. Population 410 without experienced less DNA damage than 410 with. No, that's just not true. Oh, well, that is true, but that makes sense, right? The exposure is what gets it, so that's fine. The population 800 meters above sea level without experienced less DNA than the population of 450 with. 800 without, 450 with. Oh, without. 450 with. 800 without. I have no idea. I don't even know this is asking. Inconsistent with the researchers' observations about the frog populations. Okay, well, let's go back to the lines. Maybe that tells me something. Frog populations at the higher altitudes showed less DNA damage. Therefore, naturally higher UVB exposures showed less DNA damage than their lower altitude brethren when exposed to the same amount. So, yeah, so high altitude means less damage. Then they're lower. So there's nothing about without. High altitude. I don't understand. The 2450 feels like the one that matters. So, where'd it go? More DNA damage. Inconsistent. 800 was more than 294. And they're both with UV. 800. Yeah, that's probably it. Because they're supposed to have less because they're at a higher altitude. This is such a hard question. I don't know. I'd come back to this. Is that the end of this one? Yeah. Cool. 45. All right, I got 20 minutes left for 2 passages. This is not looking good. Let's see. Begin. From this person, history of the rise and process and the termination. This passage addresses the time period directly following the revolution. Okay. Over the course of the passage, the main focus shifts from. So we're going to come back to this. Image of the child. Okay, serves 2. Okay. The state of infancy. Okay. But the connection had dissolved, the Gordian knot, Great Britain, American cut and sundered, though the independence of the United States was by the treaty clearly established on the basis of the Americans felt themselves in a state of infancy. That is a child learning to walk. They were afraid of their own movements. Their debts were unpaid. Their government unsettled, and the people out of breath. Okay, so they're afraid. Okay. Characters of the United States' decision to seek independence as juvenile? No. Emphasize the inexperience of Americans in navigating... Yeah, inexperience, that seems right. Acknowledge the naivete of Americans in believing it? No. Criticize the United States' attempt to become... No, it's not critical. It's B. Warren implies that after Americans won independence, they questioned whether they would be. Okay, they questioned whether we would be. Okay, so we're looking for something that talks about questioning. Their debts were unpaid. They would become poor. The neglect of their usual occupations. From the versatility of human affairs and the approaching spirit of man was yet uncertain, and when and how the states would be tranquilized and the union consolidated under wise, energetic, and free nodes of government. Okay. Would be administered agreed to laws found on a beautiful theory of republicanism. Is indeed true that from general attention, the early kitchen people of the United States were better informed in many branches. Where does this go? The next is in the 20s. It is indeed true. Many of them have a superficial knowledge. They're ignorant, did not fully understand the nature or origin. They generally supposed there was little to do, shake off the yoke of foreign domination. They were not generally sensible. Okay, I don't even know what we're talking about here. Whether they would be forced to rejoin to secure their financial future, able to return the occupations, able to create a political system that appeases all citizens, beholden to other countries to their mass debt. Okay, their debts were, and the people out of breath in the long struggle of freedom and defense, they were become poor. Loss of trade, neglect of their usual occupations, from the adversity of human affairs and the encroaching spirit of man was yet uncertain when and how the states would be tranquilized and the union consolidated, free modes of government, or whether such, if established, would be administered agreeable to laws founded on the beautiful theory of republicanism depicted in the closets of philosophers. Okay, so it's just they're uncertain of how they're going to govern themselves. No. I guess this is it. I don't know this. I don't know this one. Let's skip it. Warren contrasts America's knowledge of different areas of study with their unworldly view of... Okay. People of the United States were better informed in many branches of literature, yet many of them had a superficial knowledge of mankind. They were ignorant of the intrigues of courts, and though convinced of the necessity of government, did not fully understand its nature or origin. They generally supposed there was little to do but to shake off the yoke of foreign domination. So they didn't know how to govern. With their unworldly view of popular literature... Sometimes different areas of study with their unworldly view of, I think it's human nature, the theories of democracy. No, they're talking about how people, human nature, mankind. They don't know mankind. That's fine. That's good. In the passage, Warren characterizes Americans in the post-revolution. She says, okay, how does she characterize them? Damn, this is hard. 1974, okay. If established, would be administered agreed with laws, cost of phenosis, okay. Idolizing the imagination of most of the inhabitants, okay. So, I don't know, it's about the government. 25-28. Is it true? They were better informed in many branches of literature. Okay. Literature. 30-35. They're ignorant of the intrigues of courts, necessarily, and convinced that they did not fully understand its nature or origin. Yeah, they don't understand government again. 62-69. This is going to break the chronology, I think. Yeah, let's see. 62-69. It may be required today in all the triumph of independent feelings, but perhaps tomorrow the world would be convinced that mankind know not how to make a proper use of the prize generally borrowed in a short time. Is this even about them? This is not about the colonists, so it's not that. Okay. So they're naive and idealistic, aimless and neglected, imaginative and resourceful, learned and cultured. Well, the learned and cultured thing is just, that's not true. They're better informed, but that's not to say that they're learned and cultured. They're talking about their views of mankind as naive and idealistic, imaginative and resourceful. So positive, negative, negative, positive. What are we saying in these lines? So here, they're not sure about something. They are better informed. There's this ignorance. And ignorance of what? They did not fully understand its nature or origin. They had generally supposed there was little to do but to shake off the yoke. So yeah, they're idealistic. They thought all we have to do is throw away the king and then we're going to be good. So they're naive and idealistic. Neglected, I don't even know what that means. So we're going to go with that. And that was 30-35? Yeah. Okay. Warren claims that there is a historical pattern of governance that should serve as a warning to Americans in that the most successful governments are, okay, most successful government, they were not generally sensible, that most of the established modes of strong government are usually the consequence of fraud or violence against the system of democratic theorists. They were not sensible that from age to age the people are flattered, deceived, or threatened until the hoodwinked multitude set their seals of renunciation on their privileges. They were totally fearless in the intrigues and the ambition of their own countrymen, which might in time render them fruitless in their blood and treasures. These were freely lavish to secure their equality of condition, their easy modes of subsistence. It was not long before they awakened to new energies, convulsions. Okay, so something about being strong, right? Strong governments are usually the consequence of fraud or violence. That most successful governments are something bad. Reluctant to impose constraints on their citizens, but actively censor and no. Unable to discontinue policies enforced by their previous no, not about previous leaders. Enabled by their citizens' blind trust to act without oversight. Willing to use treachery or intimidation. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Which choice provides the best evidence that after the war, Americans wanted a political system that did not require much of them? Did not require much of them. Interesting. Okay. It's probably one of these two, 39 to 44, chronology rule. They were not generally... Oh, no, here. They were not sensible from that. From age to age, the people are flattered, deceived, or threatened until the hoodwinked multitude set their own seals to renunciations of their privileges and with their own hands rivet the chains of servitude on their posterity. What? That after the war, Americans wanted to listen. It's not. I don't think it says that. 48 to 52. They had freely lavished to secure their equality of condition, their easy modes of subsistence, and their exemption from public burdens beyond the necessary demands for the support of a free. Yeah, so that was it. That's it. I'll read 55, 57, and 80 to 85, but that's definitely it. Okay. 55. Now, eggs and cheese are more splendid modes of government that might have to be not to come from the region. No, it doesn't say anything. Oh, God, the scrolling. 80 to 85. 80 to 85. If thus by habit they already believe that mankind in general are incapable of the enjoyment of that liberty which nature seems to prescribe, and the mass of the people have not. Yeah, no. So it's definitely that. Okay. 48. Secure most nearly means. Okay. 48. Secure. These they had freely lavished to secure their equality to gain their easy modes of subsistence. To guarantee. In the last paragraph, Warren states that rulers are appointed through deceptive means and by... Rulers are appointed through deceptive means. This is the usual course of human conduct, and the reflection that may be the patriot in retirement, the philosopher absorbed in theoretical disquisition, human liberty, the personal, natural, and political freedom to which man has come. The game of deception is played over and over to mislead the judgment of men and work on their enthusiasms with their own consent. Hereditary crowns and distinctions are fixed, and some sign of royal descent is entailed upon them forever. Thus, by habit, they already believe that mankind in general are incapable of the enjoyment of that liberty which nature seems to prescribe, and that the mass of the people have not the capacity and the right to choose their own masters. Okay. In the last paragraph, it says the rulers are appointed through deceptive means and by promising economic. No. Persuasive ideologies of philosophers, bartering with other political leaders. No. Compliance of the public. Yeah, that's what it says. Yeah. The game of deception is played to mislead the judgments of men and work in their enthusiasm with their own consent. Yeah, that's what she says. Okay, so I got everything except I got to do number 1. Over the course of the passage, the main focus is from analysis of the difficulties facing America's reflection on the repercussions of a human characteristic. Maybe. A warning about America's government to a critique. No, it's not about Britain. Description of America's education system. No. A recollection of the end of the war to a recommendation of Americans. No. A. Woo! All right, 54. 10 minutes. All right, last passage is the double. I've only got 10 minutes left. Let's see. It's going to be close. All right. Carnivore Way is adapted from missing links. Okay. Food webs. A trophic cascade occurs when the presence of a predator decreases the population of its prey, thereby increasing the number of organisms in the next lower trophic level. So increase, decrease, increase. Okay, cool. One important function of the first paragraph, passage 1, is to, in the early 2000s, wolves began to drift down from Canada across the border from Idaho into Washington State. The natural wolf colonization inspired ecologists as when interested in scientific thinking, consider potential impacts. Okay, impacts would have on the intricate workings of the lynx snowshoe. At the time, Washington had low hair and lynx populations and high coyote. So coyotes have recently expanded their range and abundance their wolves preying coyotes with the wolves return. Okay, so it's setting things up. Assert the strength of the assumptions that inform the hypothesis that Ripple and his colleagues developed. Okay, maybe. Describe the ecological situation. Yeah, that's probably it. Define important concepts that Ripple and his colleagues... No, it's not defining anything. Compare behavioral traits. No. So assert the strength of the assumptions that inform the hypothesis. We're not talking about the hypothesis. There's nothing assumption. This is just stating facts about what's going on. As used in line 16, drive most nearly means. Okay. Ripple and colleagues hypothesis the two mechanisms would drive wolf, coyote, lynx, snowshoe hare trophic cascades. Would cause. Yeah. All right. Passage 1 indicates that Ripple and his colleagues would expect to find that in areas where wolves have returned, elk and deer. So more wolves equals what? Okay. So something about elk and deer. First, they're killing coyotes. They would do this. They're reading when humans follow wolves to extinction. They removed an important check on coyote numbers. Coyote numbers increase for pressure on links for foods such as hares, therefore by raising codes in the system, could create alarms for the links. The research further emphasizes that because the coyotes also prey on links, reduction of coyote numbers in rosewood. Okay. South of the U.S., wolves prey on elk and deer. When elk and deer numbers are high, these herbivores can suppress shrubs via heavy browsing. Woodland colors hypothesize the wolves' return would reduce elk and deer numbers and also change their behavior in order to survive. That means keeping their heads up and spending less time standing in one spot with their heads down, as they typically do when there are no wolves in the system. To reduce browsing, pressure on shrubs, which would improve snowshoe hare. Oh my gosh, there's so many things. So it's going to, the first thing is it's going to lower the elk and deer. Finally, when arrows have returned, elk and deer feed on fewer varieties of shrubs, not about the varieties, exist in lower numbers than they did prior to the local... Okay, wait. In areas where wolves have returned, elk and deer exist in lower numbers than they did prior to the Yeah, that seems right. Graze for shorter periods. Wolves have returned. Graze for shorter periods without interruption than they did. Yeah, that also seems right. Hold on. Demonstrate less fearful behavior toward coyotes. Well, they're not comparing that. So wait a minute. In areas where wolves have returned, elk and deer exist in lower numbers than they did prior to the local extermination. Than they did prior to the local extermination. Graze for shorter periods without interruption. I think this is going to be a trap that I'm kind of falling for because it seems obvious, but I guess they never say that. Do they say that the elk and deer? The wolves' return would reduce elk and deer numbers and also change their behavior. Yeah, it does say they're going to have lower. I would expect to find that in areas where wolves have returned, elk and deer exist in lower numbers than they did, lower than before. No! Wait. Prior to the extermination. No. Okay, yeah, I almost fell for a trap here. If there's wolves... Yeah, okay, it's definitely C. The problem is the wolves. I can't really talk about it because I'm running out of time, but yeah, that's definitely it. It's the browsing. This is a trap I almost fell for. Which Ocean Passage 2 best supports the idea that findings about the effects of wolves on coyotes in some locations, may not be representative of the effects of wolves on coyotes in all locations. Okay. So there's some uncertainty here that we're looking for. 49:53. All right, 7 minutes, 49:53. Okay. Ripple et al. Correctly said that wolves can affect coyotes both behaviorally and ecologically, and it's shown by Berger. Okay. 53-57. However, despite the well-publicized initial declines in coyote abundance, coyotes may now be adapting to wolves. Okay, so may now be adapting, so that sounds like some uncertainty, so that might be right. 61-64. The inverse relationship between wolves and coyotes in Yellowstone is not supported outside the 2 national parks. That also sounds good. Okay. 78-81. Sure, hypothesize coyotes compete with lynx through both interference competition and indirect exploitative competition for shared food resources. Well, it has to do with the lynx. I don't know if that's to do with... yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with the wolves. Okay. Findings of the effect of wolves on coyotes in some locations may not... So the location is important. 61-64 is talking about outside the 2 national parks, right? So it's talking about different locations. That's definitely it. The authors of Passage 2 provide the information about coyote mortality rates in northwest Montana, most likely too. So Montana, where do they talk about that? Montana. Okay. In other systems where wolves, coyotes, and lynx coexist, research shows a positive relationship between wolves and coyotes, whereby coyotes benefit from scavenging on wolf-killing ungulate cards. The generally low mortality rates of radio-collared coyotes killed by wolves outside of Yellowstone and northwest Montana is 3 times less than those killed by cougars. Thus, this quick review of the literature suggests the strongest generality that wolves have a direct negative effect on coyotes is at best inconsistent. Yeah, so it's just saying it's inconsistent. Offering an alternative explanation for coyote declines, emphasize the strength of wolf-caused trophic cascade. No. Illustrate the claim that the presence of wolves can indirectly benefit coyotes. Support the claim that wolves may not always pose a major direct... Ooh. Offer an alternative explanation for coyote declines in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Low mortality rates of red-clawed coyotes killed in northwest outside of Yellowstone is 3 times less than those killed by cougars. It's a positive relationship, right? Okay. Well, no, they're saying they're not offering an alternative. The presence of wolves can indirectly benefit coyotes. No, they're getting killed. Yeah, the cougars are the bigger threat. The presence of wolves can indirectly... It's not saying they benefit. They're still getting killed. Yeah. I don't know. This is tough. I don't know. I'm running out of time. In 4 minutes. In line 81, the authors of passage 2 will use the word shared, most likely to indicate the coyotes and links. 81. Indirect versus... Okay. Shared food. They share them. They have some overlap in their diets. Will sometimes feed together. Are both preyed on by wolves. May scavenge each other's prey. The coyotes compete with lynx through both interference competition, direct killing or displacement, indirect exploitive competition for shared shoot. Yeah, they're not killing. Respond. Press this. It's actual an observation of a single juvenile lynx killed by a coyote, and the has not. Sure, cite evidence for profit level. Well, shared. Have some overlap in their diets. May scavenge each other's prey. I don't even know. Exploitative competition. Interference and indirect. Coyotes compete with lynx through both interference competition, direct killing or displacement. Oh, they're killing each other? And indirect... Yeah, food. Okay, yeah, no, it's that. This might be the answer, but whatever. Which choice business? Okay, passage 2 presents information that challenges aspects. Yeah, probably. Cast down the authenticity of the data. No, they're not saying it's bad data. Passage 2 argues for need for modifications hypothesis. Passage 2 I discusses a study intended to test parts hypothesis. Ugh, I hate when they don't just directly disagree. Probably A. I'm going to come back to it if I have time. I'm just running short of time. Based on the passage, Ripple and his colleagues in the author's passage 2 most likely agree with which statements about wolves and coyotes. Wolves and coyotes typically occupy the same trophic level. It is possible for wolves to initiate trophic cascades through their effect on coyotes. We also agree with which statement? Yeah, there are some circumstances where the coyotes that may benefit. Wolves and coyotes both have ecological on large. It's not this. It is possible for wolves to initiate trophic cascades through their effects on coyotes. This seems so weak. This is probably right. The authors of passage 2 suggest that the hypothesis described in 28 to 32 is 28 to 32, 2 minutes. 28 to 32 is here. Therefore, by reducing coyotes in the system, a returning wolf population could directly create ecological benefits for the lynx. The research further hypothesizes that because coyotes are also preying on lynx, a reduction of coyote numbers by wolves could release predation pressures on lynx. So good for lynx, plus lynx, right? There's also preying on lynx. Yeah, okay. So, okay. They would probably say it's messy. Yeah. 65 to 88, basically, we're reading. Okay. 65, in other words, going to exist, research for positive relationship, or coyotes benefit, okay, gender salaries, this is a couple of cougars, this is about that, pursuers have both interference. Unfortunately, evidence for interference comes to essentially limited to anecdotal observations. An observation of a single juvenile lynx killed by a coyote is not evidence for that. Or in the scenario, the population more predation was attributed to wolves or next to coyotes. Variations between coyotes and lynx were rare. Okay. But not valid for many populations, not for all. Difficult to test based on insufficient data because of that. Done. Oh, 30 seconds to spare. Okay, so that was rough for me. I was really up against the clock. I'm usually not that tight for time. I think part of it is that even though I said I wasn't going to explain everything, I just can't help myself. And I know that people are watching this looking for reasons for the wrong answers and the wrong choices. So even as I was trying not to, I was still taking more time than I would have to explain to you my reasoning on a lot of questions. It wasn't the best version of my explanations, but I think there's still part of me that is saying things out loud that would normally just be in my head and so automatic that I don't need to vocalize it. Also, reading the passages out loud as I was going, that takes more time than if I just said them in my head. You might have heard near the end, I started to just like mumble the words. That's because that's kind of how I do it in my head. I'm not reading every word per se, but I am kind of still reading for big ideas. Now, I did pause it, and I took the time to grade my responses. I was not expecting this, but I only got one question wrong. It was in this first passage. I will look at it with you in a second. But I also looked at the scoring table, and 51 out of 52 ended up being a perfect 40 for my score. So on this particular test, you could get one wrong and get an 800 or get a 40 out of 40. And so there you go. I got one wrong, but I still have a perfect reading score. Notice I did not read the passages. There were lots of times where things I didn't understand, but I had to move on. So a lot of this is being able to let go. But because I've been practicing for years now, I know what wrong answers sound like. And I kind of know better than most people, I think, what the question wants me to do and where traps are going to be. So let's talk about the one that I missed. It was this number 4. In the passage, the actions of Jess's father suggest that he. And you can notice I have this little circle here. That would have been my little cue to myself that if I did have time, this is one of the ones I would have wanted to go back to. I didn't really find any answers here. I felt that this was very difficult for me. I get this is very strong. I get why C is wrong. D ends up being the answer. The actions of Jess's father suggest that he wishes to promote Jess's introduction to her grandfather. I feel like this might be a little bit of a break of the chronology rule, because if we do read where we're supposed to, it doesn't really say, right? He greeted her mother, he shook hands with the father. This is the grandfather. That's the father saying slightly outside the circle, it smiled encouragingly at her. Honestly, maybe that's enough. Maybe I should have just focused on that one word. The father is encouraging the daughter. Now, what's tricky there is outside the circle is definitely a very strong phrase in that line as well. So that kind of is what I was focusing on and why I was maybe drawn to something like A. Like, why is he outside the circle? Maybe he's less sociable. But I noticed as I was thinking, like, okay, that's me doing a lot of the work, right? Like, that's me saying a reason. But just because he's standing outside, maybe he's outside the circle. Like, maybe that's just so many spots in the circle and they're really focused on the grandfather meeting the girl, the granddaughter. So this felt strong. And then it definitely wasn't about the culture. I was very sure about B. Now, notice I crossed out D. Wishes to promote Jess's introduction to her grandfather. I guess I never really saw that it was the dad's like point of view. Like, it wasn't saying what he wanted, but I guess he's encouraging her. So this word is strong, but it checks out. Now, advocates for Jess to choose her own name. I focused here, I used a dumb summary to pick that. I couldn't find the kind of, clue that I was looking for. But the lines that I read were all about the name. So I made a kind of dumb summary judgment. And I said, well, if everything's about the name, then the choice is probably about the name. But I should have kind of followed my own advice from earlier, right? Advocate is as strong of a word as wish. They mean the same thing. Like, the person wants something and is in favor of something. And so we need evidence of that. And so I kind of ignored it to pick C. But I was skeptical of it. I think, I didn't feel confident about this answer. But that was the only one I missed. There were a lot of other ones that I missed. We can kind of look at some, or that I was unsure of. We can kind of look at them. I felt really good on this passage. I was a little over time, but I think this is because I was getting used to talking to you. If I go to passage 2, I got everything right here. This one was very difficult for a passage 2, just very dense. Lot of moving around. I'm even now getting very frustrated by this system of scrolling. It does not work well. I like a passage in a book, where I can flip the pages. That's what I'm worried about with the digital SAT. The new SAT, the one thing I'm worried about is that it's just going to be cumbersome to move between questions. Luckily, there are no long passages on the new SAT. Everything is just one, short 10-line thing with a question, so there won't be any like flipping back and forth. But I do wonder if it'll be easy to move back and forth and see what you've done. But yeah, it doesn't look like I circled anything here. Seems like I was ready with all those. Let's look at 3. Number 27. I still don't know. Pacific tree frogs. Where the heck are the Pacific tree frogs? Am I missing something here? Pacific tree frogs. I'm scanning for the word Pacific. Pacific. Am I missing it? Pacific tree frogs. So what do they say about them? Not only that, but subsequent field studies confirm the detrimental effects of naturally occurring levels of UVB to developing eggs of some frog species. While those with the highest concentration of photolase, the Pacific tree frogs, were most resistant. Okay. So the tree frogs are resistant to the UVB, and then we learned all this stuff about why that might be, because the BAP is a similar mechanism, so it's a similar ability to cope. Yeah, so there you go. There was a good example where I couldn't find the thing I was supposed to find, even though Pacific tree frogs is like a very like distinctive phrase. I just couldn't find it anywhere, and maybe I was just being really stupid about it at the time. Is that included in any of those line references? No, it's just outside. I don't know. I don't know why I couldn't find this, but I made a reasonable assumption. I was like, okay, the line in D, which was definitely the right line reference for 28, was talking about the similarity between the UVB gene and this other gene, right? It's right here, 60 to 70 here. The DNA damage. Now we're talking about some other thing. It's related to the UVB thing, right? Like my dumb summary here is that they're just like saying this is a comparison. So notice that my answer number 27 was it's a comparison. It's similar, right? Like this is a good example of like sometimes you just need to pull the trigger and like pick something and you probably understand more than you think. I didn't know for sure that was the answer, but I'm like, okay, they seem to be making a comparison. This one sounds like a comparison. Boom, let's move on. That you need to be able to be comfortable with. Otherwise, you're not going to finish in time. 32, oh my gosh, this one is so freaking hard for a graph question. So this one, population at 800 meters above sea level, I don't even know. I picked it because it just like, it's so hard to follow. The 800 with 294 with, and it's more, right? So that was true. See, I think honestly for this question, the hardest thing was me flipping back and forth. I couldn't remember enough of the words. So they're talking about this box compared to this box. And the whole point of all this is that the more altitude, right, the more resistant they become because they have whatever this photolase thing is that like saves them. So I guess it's weird that at this higher altitude they have more damage because in theory they're supposed to have less. I don't know. This felt like a stretch for me, but I guess it makes sense in hindsight. But yeah, oof, rough. Passage 4. This is where I really made up time. And this is just bad luck, I guess. You know, if this were a test where you had this test and you are a kind of person who struggles with timing, this would be a very difficult arrangement of passages. The second and even the first passage, I think, are very tricky. And then suddenly the fourth passage is a breeze. I did this in like 6 minutes. You guys might be able to tell me the time, but it was like 6-7 minutes. It was really fast. I made up time here, which is weird because it's the history passage, right? These are supposed to be the hardest ones, and yet it was so obvious what they kept saying. So I didn't really have any. Yeah, this one I was a little unsure of. I didn't like the word all, but now in hindsight, if I go back, it does say it. Where was this? This was somewhere in after line 7. So here, would be administered agreeable to laws found in the beautiful theory of republicanism and depicted in the closets of philosophers, idolizing the imagination of most of the inhabitants of America. Most is a strong word. All is a strong word. I'm okay with it. I'm all right. It's not great. I don't love that word all, but I was able to pick it because nothing else seemed to work. So sometimes you have to kind of just compromise, go with a strong answer just because. And then number 5 was where I was really feeling it because normally with a double, we have a very clear relationship between the passages. They're usually just like straight up disagreement, especially when they're history passages. That did not happen here. So it was very difficult for me to get to these comparative questions and think about them quickly. But I still think I was able to use dumb summaries to get them right. Looking at number 49, for example, the relationship. Well, they do kind of disagree. I do remember reading things about like one is saying that the wolves being introduced is going to have all these effects. And then most of the questions for passage 2 were like, hold on a second, we don't know. There's different data, there's different stuff. Like that's not like a straight up like, no, you're wrong, but it's definitely a disagreement of some sort. And so challenges aspects is a very nice way of saying this disagreement. And of all the choices, between A, C, and D, C are just very specific. Argues the need for modifications. Well, I don't remember reading what the modifications were. And discusses a study intended to test parts of the hypothesis. Well, there's lots of studies, I guess, but they're always like thrown in there to challenge it. So like, they're not getting specific. These are very specific problems or connections, whereas A is much more general. challenges aspects of the hypothesis. Like, that could mean anything, whereas C and D are very specific about what they mean. And so when you're crunched for time, you can kind of feel this sometimes, that one choice is like, well, this barely says anything, or this just says that they disagree, and these other two are specifically talking about ways in which they disagree. Odds are good that they're going too far and going in the wrong direction. And I don't think I starred these, but I should have. 50, 51, 52. These were all rough for me. This was just where I was losing the time. Likely with which statement about wolves and coyotes? No, because they're never the same. It is possible for wolves to initiate. Right. So this is a good example. They always ask like the question like 49. What is the relationship? They disagree. Usually they disagree. And then 50 is kind of like, well, if they disagree, then what do they agree on, right? So normally they agree on the problem, but disagree on the solution. This is a very common theme in the doubles. They agree on the problem, they disagree on the solution. So they might agree that women are gaining more rights, but they'll disagree. And one person say, no, that's terrible. Women should not have more rights. Another person will be like, are you kidding? Women should have more rights. Like, that'll be the setup. Here, it's a little different, but it's still, they're like, okay, it's possible that wolves do this stuff. But passage 2 goes and says, well, we don't know for sure, but it is possible. Passage 1 is a little bit more certain of that. So even in their disagreement, they agree on the kind of like the setup, the proposal, the hypothesis. They just disagree on how strong it should be, considered. Like, this is true. They definitely kind of talk about this. I don't know. This one felt like this maybe felt like my second best answer. This is more like a specific fact, whereas this is more the main idea between the two, is that the wolves are about it. And maybe that's the thing, is sometimes you ask dumb summary questions of yourself, like who's the main character of the passages? In both passages, the main character is the wolves. So the wolves are what's going on in choice B. But choice C, who's the main character? The coyotes. Maybe it's a stupid way to separate them, but these are the kinds of questions I ask myself, and sometimes they work. Sometimes they don't. If I got that one wrong, I wouldn't have been surprised. And then here, I had to quickly do this one, but I did remember this thing here. Direct interactions are rare. So I think I just got lucky, because I thought 86 to 88 was that line reference. What are they saying? 86 to 88 is kind of here and here. An observation of a single juvenile lynx, so it's repetition, killed by a coyote is not evidence for a trophic level interaction. Yeah. Is not prima facie evidence. Yeah. I got kind of lucky there. But it was a little bit of memory, knowing that they were saying that this is just not enough evidence, and I just kind of misread the numbers, but this is the benefit of a lot of these passages, and this is maybe a good theme to leave you on, is that if something is a main idea, in the lines, odds are good that it will be repeated. So even if you feel like, I don't understand what I'm reading, you might not understand one instance of that idea, but you probably understand the other 2 or 3, and so you have to stop worrying about the one thing that you don't understand and trust the 2 or 3 that you do and say like, okay, that's probably enough. So that saved me here. And then as far as the choices go, they're going to give you specific things to look for. So even if you don't understand what you're reading, the choice is usually much more understandable. And every time you saw it, I'm constantly flipping back and forth because I'm like, okay, what am I looking for? Every time I went back to those lines, I was looking for an idea. And sometimes my memory helped me, but a lot of times I didn't understand the lines enough. And so you've got to give yourself a task. If you are just reading for the sake of understanding, you will feel lost and you will waste a lot of mental energy trying to understand things you don't need for the question. The choices tell you, go look for this. So that's a task. And the one question I missed, going back to passage 1 here, the one question I missed, where is it? Here. Notice, why was this one so hard? Because there was just one instance of the word I needed, The word that says that he wishes to promote this introduction, it was just this one word that he's going encouragingly, go meet your grandfather. One word, and I didn't notice it, or I didn't emphasize it enough. And when I do get questions wrong on the reading, it is for that reason. I don't notice the one word you're supposed to notice. The Pacific tree frogs, right? Same thing. And it happens sometimes, but it happens rarely. And that's okay. Hopefully will have enough time left over to go back and hunt for those really, really tough ones. But for 90% of the questions, main ideas are repeated ideas. Trust the process and then deal with the 10% that's weird. That's the entire reading strategy in a nutshell. Trust that it'll work most of the time and then deal with the weirdos, and hopefully you can. I hope this helped. This was a nightmare to film. So please subscribe. Make sure that you pay me back for all this time that it took to film and edit this. This is a nightmare. I hate doing this. I hate the reading section. But if you can subscribe and tell your friends to subscribe, visit my website, click links, all of it helps me, then it will have been worth it. And I thank you for that.